Alright, welcome back, lovely people. It is Monday again. Another reset week for Neverwinter. We are in week 9 of the Demonweb Hits update. As mentioned last week, the vast majority of people who are tracking their progress, they had a 2-week half start due to the purchasable item. So most of the veterans or those who are existing players have completed their tasks, their campaign task last week. We migrated one task this week. It was more or less a bye week, but it looks like a milestone, the last milestone and this milestone is going to be a repeat where you collect energy and line up the Abyssal Tear task with a weekly task. That's my guess because it looks like it's on bare ice. So we're looking at just your standard upkeep day or upkeep weekday. Not sure if 10 is going to do anything either. I imagine at some point after 10, either Verai stops adding the extra milestone thing, or he adds that onto a repeatable. I don't expect anything to change. So the last 2 milestones is more a moot point at this point. We're looking at 4s and 5s out of 10s, your average thing. It seems like perhaps that will be a primer for next module where they would add another 6th milestone or 7th milestone design in some way, spread it out a little bit more, because it looks like it just ended at 6 or milestone 5, which lines up with the campaign, right? The storyline where it leads up to the Demonweb Pits dungeon. Let's make sure I got those numbers correctly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, milestone 5 is the finale with one bye week. So in a way, it's reasonable just to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then leave the rest void at this point. Maybe it's a development cycle or resource timing issue, where this is just to extend the extra month so that the next update psychologically is closer, right? This is one of the strategies, I would say, in terms of development cycle and publishing, like time and resource, where you take the core foundation of the update. So let's just say the first 5 or 6 weeks. I think this is being cute in a way, because if you bought the 2-week advance, you would close this gap earlier within the quote-unquote 4 or 5 weeks. Generally, what design tends to be is you do a month's update across the month to set a foundation, then bootstrap the next 4 or 5 weeks, and then you have a lull period of a month, and then introduce the new content. You spend that lull month generating teasers or advertisements for the following month. So you have maybe a reasonable 3-month cycle in development. That's kind of how it looks right now. Perhaps they will fill in a little bit of test different designs to increase the bootstrapping off the cycle. They have tried a few things, like redeemables, which is a welcome addition, like post the bootstrapping, so through the lull period. And I guess you have boons to carry over too. So it has always these two have been trying to fill in this gap that's in between the 2-month period for the next announcement. So the next 2 weeks I don't expect this week or next week to change dramatically outside of what you're bootstrapping for. On a different note, though, there was a patch note, and it was a mechanical one. So there's been a little bit of transparency on what they call power interruptions, but I would still globally and universally refer to them as animation canceling, right? So the cleric, based on the way they have measured base performance, I actually think they used a specific term. Let's see. Or a specific metric. Let's go take a look at the quick metric first. I still think it's probably from a pain giver perspective, but let's see what the specific term they used. Actually, they didn't say what the baseline is. They just Cryptic just says baseline. So, alright. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that it's overall performance in more than specific metrics outside of like damage input or AP accumulation or mechanical output and effectiveness. There is a chance they're referring to AP baseline. So power interruptions, or what I usually have traditionally referred to as animation cancel. Typically animation cancel, I would refer to them as, if it does involve animation cancel, but in this game, I would call it more like plus action. So action plus, whichever one, where you gain baseline action. So you reduce recovery time or you increase activation time. However you spin it, it's a plus action type of input. So you increased the activity per second, right? The APM, actions per second, or actions per minute. And I'm guessing they're looking at baseline AP accumulation, and the clerics have been known for its blessing of light. You see a lot. So apparently this was over a baseline that was very high, and they adjusted it in a way that hopefully reduces the APM gap, like the APM benefit, however still redistribute its effectiveness to something else, right? So that lower the APM bias and increase its effectiveness slightly to compensate for it. Overall, I guess that's a tune down for the gap between how much APM increase is benefiting. How is this relevant to me? I'm an APM player, so I tend to be someone who I'm not gonna beat around the bush. I'm not fast fingers or a macro guy and whatnot. I just like moving my fingers to maintain the dexterity in my fingers and then like process different interactions. So because of this, one of the hallmarks of the combat mechanics in Neverwinter is that responsiveness in use is a very important thing, and responses in use may lead to the flexibility of animation cancel or power interruptions, as they call it. And that's one of the nuances of gameplay, rewarding individuals with higher return on quicker execution. This direction that they're using for clerics is to scale it back. I don't typically use this cleric tech too often. I've done it before for a bit back in the day. I just don't play cleric too often. The reason this is relevant to me is I do play guard type exclusively, almost exclusively, all the guard type classes in this game, and the guard type classes are the highest, I would say, flexibility in animation cancel due to guard. But guard has a fundamental trade-off that makes it necessary, in my opinion. Like, it compromises on the idea that it does not have iframes. So all the guard gated classes, which includes the fighter, the paladin, and the barbarian, minus the blade master, right? The blade master is with the warlock, which they also have a specific trade-off due to sprinting, but we're not going to touch upon that. But sprinting can be in this talk too in terms of power interruption. So slipping in warlock sense and barbarian sprint is a part of power interruption as well. But guard gating is even higher because guard provides AP as well. And this is more concerning our AP over baseline AP generation. To me personally, they actually had a very specific line in the patch notes that directed towards, I mean, it's obviously not personal. However, I would say I am probably one of the very few, like relatively speaking, a very smaller group of people who understands how to APM benefit from Sentinel Slash on the Barbarian Sentinel. In fact, I would probably make a humble argument that I'm probably one of the first groups of people who have used the Sentinel tech APM since its inaugural introduction in mod 13. I think it was 13. It was the Undermountain mod. That's when the Sentinel Paragon was first introduced. And it's probably the cornerstone. This power interruption is probably the cornerstone of effectiveness in Sentinels. So they made a jab where like it's allowing to skew certain class balances, and then they acknowledge that certain classes are only competitive. I would say sufficient. I would use the word sufficient. Competitive requires this to be a competitive process, and the classes themselves are so distinctively mechanically varied that they are in a non-competitive environment. I think using that whole phrasing and acknowledging what I would think is an inappropriate use of this philosophy or psychology of competitiveness while comparing apples and oranges is erroneous. It actually makes it feel like it normalizes metrics when that is not the core of making classes feel I would say interesting to play. So for example, this statement, we understand that some classes are only competitive because specific powers can be interrupted in this way, and they put in parentheses, we're looking at you, Sentinel Slash. So like Sentinel Slash can be interrupted with a guard. There are no other priorities above the Sentinel Slash, really, in general, that would benefit other than the guard. But what Sentinel Slash provides is an alternative source of AP while holding a guarded state in Sentinel. And they suggested that they hope to make those classes less reliant on this mechanic, as in not the mechanic of Sentinel Slash, but the mechanic of power interruption. However, they also made a concession that Neverwinter was built on allowing players to interrupt powers with other powers. So there's a slight contradiction and a slight ambivalence or confusion in where they're going with this. However, I would love for them to introduce some alternative mechanics. But what they're trying to suggest is that they're pivoting away from power interruption. That's a little concerning, because the combat MMO does benefit from the finesse and the precision and execution of power interruption in general. If they provide if there was a providing of like 2 or 3 alternative mechanics that embraces some sort of combat mechanic that involves input, that I'd be open to that for sure. I just wanted to make a note of that it is still not clear whether it was it was built allowing players to interrupt powers, but are they moving away from that? Which is a fair choice if they want to. It changes the system, and I welcome the change in system. It does make it less, I guess, rubbery sometimes, and I can see where they're going with that, because the other change involves the fighter, which personally I didn't quite enjoy myself, but I can see others using it to the benefit, was the slide strafing. I generally refer to it as rubber banding, or like jiggling, or at will shifting, and it happens to way more than just the fighter. But for this occasion, they're specifically referring to heavy slash and wreath. Basically, when you execute an at will, and the physical input is holding down the at will and the wreath while holding a movement direction, you shift. You move, like your body slightly moves as it's being executed. And what they did was more or less remove that entirely, so the two inputs having different priorities, and they're overlapping the priorities, so both things happen at the same time. It can no longer register both at the same time. And in general, what they did was they allow the recovery frames, they shortened the recovery frames of the heavy slash and wreath, which I'll find out today, because it's the first time I'm gonna be playing my fighter again because of the weekly reset, and I'll see what happens on the Dreadnought. But there are others as well, so they're moving away from what I would say is the looseness in control. So like animation canceling and power interruption is largely a design of action combat games, especially input heavy combat games. And input heavy combat games, the term I would use is how tight or loose the inputs are. And generally I would say Neverwinter, if say a fighting game, Street Fighter 6 or something, is a 10, and World of Warcraft or any tab-based mechanic, CD heavy animation locked RPG is 0, or a turn-based game, sure, like 0, right? It's strict. I would place Neverwinter around a 6 right now. Another game I play is PSO NGS. I would put that around the same, 6 or 7. So in a way, it's kind of in a pretty interesting balanced place between being loose and tight. However, it seems like they're going to go towards the tighter perspective, but the tighter perspective also means that it will give the developers more control over the tuning precision of how much recovery frames and how many recovery frames and how many active frames. Actually, there aren't any active frames in this game, at least not that I'm aware of. So it's just recovery frame. They're specifically focused on recovery frame. Actually, now that I think about it, I probably put it further down. So I would put Neverwinter possibly 5 or 4, where PSO2 is 6 or 7, because the active frames also matter in PSO2 NGS. In Neverwinter, I think the active frames is cast all at once. So the entire arc is just one frame. There's no that, like, if it swings, it's not active in 4 different locations. There's no activity in the range. It looks like there's swings and like the game has swings and whatnot, but the active frames are not there. So there aren't like different travel spaces of active frames, even in charge mechanics. So like if like for the Sentinel, I use Savage Advance, right? It gets activated from one position, but that position is just one position and then the position in which it connects. There rarely is any interaction along the path. So like a Mighty Leap has no activity in mid animation. It is on its activation and the location it is. You can definitely demonstrate this because when an attack, when you jump across an attack, it does not register your position in between. Anyway, so there's no active frames. So there are only recovery frames in this combat site. And the recovery frames is incredibly important because Neverwinter's ability to players select themselves into APM roles or high efficiency roles. They can be one and the same, and typically this is the case. So whenever they're encountering like the cleric or their adjustment to heavy slash and reaper, and soon I'm absolutely convinced they will adjust sentinel slash along with a lot of other things, I hope, because if they're working on one thing, I like to think they're working on other things with the sentinel. I can name a lot of them. They're adjusting so that the recovery frames no longer become a point of looseness. They're tightening up the recovery frames. So lowering all the recovery frames while removing power interruptions sounds fair to me. It is one of the unique aspects of Neverwinter that separates a player who is high efficiency, as in you're going for scaling, stat scaling. So I don't know, a high mag of 1100 can trade off for a low recovery, power interrupted 400 mag. These are different playstyles. So eliminating one requires that the efficiency path gets 2 or 3 more alternatives. So how they did this for the cleric is a tough call. I think overall the sentiments would probably be negative, where they remove an APM route while upscaling the same route. So the playstyle has effectively reduced in number. It didn't increase as an alternative. So personally, I would think overall for anyone who's combat oriented, this update was unfavorable. Unfavorable as in it didn't provide alternatives, which is what their statement is suggesting. They're trying to be less reliant on a power interruption. However, they want to be sensitive to the idea that it is a competitive form of use, right? And reducing the degree of freedom in a game like this ultimately will be negative. So I like to think that moving forward, they compensate by introducing an alternative path to Sentinels, not just because it is only competitive. The classes are non-competitive with each other. Like, in my opinion, it's a very minority opinion, but you don't compare metrics in order to fuel designs. Mechanical and input designs are non-competitive with each other in an RPG game. the metrics that people use to measure their efficiency can be competitive to each other. That's irrelevant to design, in my opinion. You don't design mechanics so that the numbers line up. That only restricts your creativity in how to find alternatives. Like, oh yeah, so how do we do it? Well, we tweak a system we already have, which is how they approached it. They removed the play efficiency playstyle with high APM, and that's it. The compensation is to tweak and balance an existing playstyle. So in becoming stricter, you remove the playstyle, which ultimately means those people it will be overall negative. The ones that it doesn't affect and get upscaled, it will continue to perform that. You reconditioned a subset of players, and hopefully, I hope Sentinels don't go in the same way, because they are only competitive with that mechanic, so they have to replace that mechanic's effectiveness. I personally would like to see that they maintain that and provide an alternative competitive playstyle, as in within a class it is a competitive nature, because you're comparing the class's variances in playstyle, not across others. I think when they said we understand that some classes are only competitive, they're referring to they understand that these classes are only competitive with other classes, not with itself. The Sentinel's mechanic is non-negotiable. It does not have alternative competitive playstyles. So the idea to enhance a less reliance on those mechanics is to offer competitive alternative playstyles, not normalizing or balancing to other classes. I feel like this, in my opinion, I strongly encourage that competitiveness is within designing mechanics, is comparing apples and apples, not apples and oranges. Contrary to how others feel about identifying as a class person, when you try to normalize mechanics to each class, you normalize all the classes. So they will effectively become flavor, where all the most of the encounters will feel like they're flavors in achieving the same goal, which in my opinion robs a combat RPG of its uniqueness, its variety. So Cleric is now in line with other healers or other AP generating ranged DPS / healers. You robbed it of a unique playstyle, and I have no idea what that means for the future of the Sentinels, but Sentinels require alternative playstyles in order to encourage a less reliance on a mechanic. You remove an alternative approach would be to remove it entirely, and it becomes less reliant, but it's overall going to generate a negative feeling because you remove the playstyle. That's it. You have to substitute or produce a competitive playstyle. So the more you remove, it's inherently negative, and the cleric change is inherently negative. I think the fighter dreadnought less so, because I don't necessarily see many use this too often. It doesn't actually dramatically overperform anything, so they're adjusting. They're just adjusting the consistency between, and that's, again, it's still doing the same philosophy where the dreadnought, that whole sliding and strafing thing, I don't personally use it, but that is what defined a dreadnought too. in its at wills. There are not many other at wills that shift beneficially like a dreadnought. I noticed it, I just don't like the feeling of it, but it's there. So addressing it, and this kind of benefits me since it exits out of canceling. It exits sooner. However, it still removes things. It didn't provide an alternative. Like, I mean, I guess it sort of did. They shortened the recovery time, so you can probably still move about the same if you know how to execute and move. So it's just a little bit more dexterity. It's a little concerning. I'm a little bit ambivalent, but we'll see what the future holds. It's a big deal to me because mechanically, is a change to mechanics. It's far more prevalent. Like, it's a consistent thing that a player will encounter versus, I don't know, a scale tweak like a magnitude bump or a magnitude decrease. This is on the level of introducing new encounter powers or new at will powers, because they fundamentally change the habit of players. When you attempt to change the habit of a player, it's easily one of the biggest barriers. I mean, one of the habits is how rewards are received or how long campaigns. Those are all habit forming, but this is one step above that. It's all your inputs. It's the fundamentals of the game. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time addressing this. I think just the sentiments that they're saying, I don't think these are great indicators that they're preserving the built intent of interrupting powers with other powers. Like, I actually think it's antagonistic to that. It's going closer to strict as like tighter controls or tighter timing than it is looser timing. And looser timing does have its compromises too. In this game, you have, red circles, and a lot of the damage and stuff are active. So if you go towards tight timing, then there's less and less wiggle room to make errors as well as take advantage. So when you get to looser timings, you do get punished harder due to like timing and wiggle room and mistakes. So it's more dynamic when you get to loose. Dynamics mean that it can be worse or better for players. If you get towards tighter timing, then there's less room for error, but there's also an inclination to refine execution. So it will condition players to be far more accurate and be able to tell repetitively and consistently more accurate in execution. So overall, if you have your pros and cons for going tighter or looser, I think the tighter thing does kind of lend to a benefit of encouraging players to have a more consistent feel. Loose rewards higher skill cap per se. If you're very prideful or like high skill cap, loose controls tend to reward those. It creates a bigger skill separation, so those who are invested gets that reward of being precise in a dynamic environment, but at the same time it also produces a larger bottom line, like a bottom out, and this large range inherently makes a game feel less consistent. Like when you average everything, it's less consistent, the average is lower. When you head towards a tight control, the average compresses down. Basically, if you understand your community well enough, and most of your community are oriented towards being rewarded for high dynamics play, as in practice makes perfect, consistent stuff, ultimately anything going towards a tighter control will be viewed negatively, like the vast majority. But if your community is far more new or casual friendly, or you're expecting to make it a bit more accessible, generally speaking, going towards tighter controls create a normalization. So it tightens the skill gap, right? The disparity. So the average goes up. And what it does is tighter controls provide a more consistent feel for anyone who's getting into the game. I honestly think that in the end of the day, communicating the use of both is something that I would use fighting games as the best example, because fighting games now introduces they're balancing with the idea of having modern controls and classic controls. Modern controls are tighter. They're consistent. When you press something, it's executed with impunity. There's no dynamics in its execution. Classic controls is looser. It allows the flexibility of timing and execution, which gives that flexibility for high skill cap. However, it also is a place of error as well. Classic controls have a higher diff learning curve because it is dynamic and execution error can occur. In Neverwinter, there's not a system or place to differentiate the two. So in a way, I can understand what Cryptic is going for in reducing the loose controls in Neverwinter, so that accessibility goes up at the cost of reducing the skill cap. So when you're tightening up, anyone who's at the top, so anyone in the 1%, which I would say when it comes to power interruption, the benefit of power interruption, I would probably include myself near the top, because that's my enjoyment of Neverwinter. I haven't really entertained like high magnitude plays where in fact I sacrifice efficiency for better APM. I preferentially prefer a game that has higher APM than efficiency. So I don't like high scaling one taps and whatnot. Others do. I think I might be I might be in the minority here, where I'm not looking for high numbers, singular numbers or singular strings, or a burst of 1 minute of incredible damage, and then you wait for the next opportunity, like artifact stacking. That's a team effort that can be very rewarding. It's just not my type of play. I don't prefer that. I like consistency playing with dynamics. So scrappy fights that have no burst damage. Like there's no burst stacking. But this game heavily heavily encourages and normalizes to burst damage. And burst damage requires consistency of execution. So when you go to tighter controls, almost anyone can execute burst damage because there's no dynamic timing anymore. You don't necessarily need to concern yourself with inputs and timing and recovery times at all to maximize anything. So I can understand that, and it brings up the bottom line up closer to the top. So any of these changes to power interruption will arguably only be negative to those that are in the minority, I would say, and I would include myself in it. It is unfortunate that I would be losing or compromising on something that I enjoy about the game for change. I like to think that moving forward, they're not eliminating something for the sake of just eliminating them. They're substituting it for something else. So convince me to want to be an efficiency player. In order to provide a competitive alternative, is not to necessarily remove power interruption, but to demonstrate that efficiency mechanics with tighter controls can be just as fruitful and engaging prior to removing or maybe removing it, adding it at the same time. The clerics didn't get that. I don't think cleric players were offered a alternative. They simply lost their alternative and have to embrace what already exists there by scaling up. I think the fighters, not so much, because the fighters had a recovery reduction. Actually, the power has much less delay before the damage applies and should feel more. Okay, I say both of them kind of did. The compromise here is they made the thing active faster. So I really would need to look at how much faster the cleric is. So what I mean is now you have to stop and go, as opposed to willy-nilly like go as fast as possible. You have to know when the window starts, when the window ends. So is the fighter. So I already do this with the heavy slash. I don't like the sliding and strafing that is involved in doing that. It causes like this weird visual rubber banding, or I call it rubber banding, but it's the animation rubber banding. So I typically do heavy slash, pause, recovery window, move, heavy slash, pause, recovery window. So I count and got used to the, activate, move, activate, move, activate, move, right? So it kind of looks like a robot moving in chunks. So now what they did was they basically removed the strafing interaction at all times. And now the heavy slash, the gap between the windows when you're moving is smaller, which is what I interpret the cleric version is too. So it's a tighter control. The execution just got shortened, right? Damage is applied earlier. Probably the recovery window is smaller. And overall, if you consistently adapt to that, you'll probably reach the same amount of efficiency. But it's still different. It's still a different play style, right? It's a tough decision here because the effectiveness of this tech overlaps with that adjustment. So if they kept this adjustment, it doesn't promote one playstyle over the other as an alternative. It actually makes the APM thing even stronger. Is there a change you can do where it doesn't benefit power interruption, but it benefits an alternative playstyle? I don't think that's an easy one for cleric to answer. The fighter thing, that's fair enough. And the last part, just to end the slight digression, which has gone on for 40 minutes now. There are other things that are incredibly jarring that makes them non-existent. That also involves the fighter thing and involves the sentinel. So they are effectively trying to address power interruption or create tighter controls. Any type of like distance gap changing, that has to fundamentally change as well, in my opinion. So like, for example, bounding slam, that's just bounding slam, threatening rush, relentless, just basically all the guard charges, all of them have a bit of slide strafing mixed with animation power interruption issues. So those have to be almost instantaneous. I think they in order to get tighter controls and not could close the gap, bounding slams active frames have to be reduced by at least half, like to the point we have to normalize all of them. So normalize all of them to like the paladins at will, because they're really loose. They can cancel mid charge, and it's inconsistent. So if players are not aware because of the looseness that you can cancel too early, in fact, Savage Advance, a daily, is also a charging attack. You can actually cancel the attack of Savage Advance because it's only active the moment you hit a target. So when you initiate it, it has to go and travel to hit the target, but you can actually accidentally interrupt that too. So as much as power interruption is being punished for overperforming because of, I would argue, a small minority of players, power interruption also have negatives as well. And in games that favor animation cancel or offer animation cancel as a alternative playstyle, there are risks involved as well. And this is not highlighted in how they're talking about over baseline. Over baseline is probably AP generation, I'm guessing in this case. When you rubber band or when you strafe or cancel by accident, you actually leave yourself vulnerable, or you mis-execute. When you mis-execute, you actually lose a lot of effectiveness. It's not just the best case scenario versus the best case scenario. A lot of times guarding cancels a lot of things. In fact, a really big one, if they're addressing tighter controls, a really incredibly big offender, Justicar's Radiant Charge daily. Actually, let's just say removing, if they're going on this crusade or this specific refinement, anything that has long animation time should be active on frame 1. And then let the animation finishes. So all encounters, in my opinion, all encounters, dailies, at wills, damage is executed on activation. That's just it. And then the recovery frame just goes through. So you just, if you're really wanting to remove animation cancel, recovery frames are obligatory, but damage dealt and its effect is always active on frame 1. The reason why I say that is because there are tons. I can name 9 off the top of my head right now where the active frame, the frame of activity, as in when the damage is dealt and executed, is varied. And it's varied so much that it gets canceled and punished for poor execution timing. So now when you remove animation cancel, power interruption, you can't cancel that, right? You get punished for activating, knowing when to recover. So what they did here for the clerics and the fighter is to remove the window, the recovery window, so that there's no need for animation cancel. Well, effectively, that would be then moving forward, whenever you remove an animation cancel, I like to think that they tighten up all the windows that animation cancel is compensating for, which is when you get stuck in an animation and then you get hit and that whole effect of the ability is wiped off. What can I say about that? I can't tell you how many times Savage Advance gets canceled on activation. And one of the compensation is that you can interrupt the power so that you save it. It rewards the player for having that ability be so loose. As in, when you activate the Savage Advance, it has not activated yet. The literal Savage Advance has startup time before it becomes active. So at that time, you are also vulnerable in all of that time. A boss can literally knock you out of the activation and you lose the use of it completely. And because there is power interruption, you can save yourself sometimes from it. So if you're removing that option, you have to add the option that it is always active on frame 1. Like, it's not sooner. I don't think that's enough. Where you say the power has less delay before the damage applies. It just applies on frame 1. And then make all, in my opinion, if you're going tight controls, recovery frames are obligatory. No interruption whatsoever. That's what they're going for, at least from this thing. Remove the recovery interruption. So you're alleviating power interruption. But now you're allowing all your opponents, all the bosses, to interrupt you by having power interruption. So the power can be interrupted now, but only in a negative sense. So the player gets double punished, where now they can be interrupted, power interrupted by outside sources, but they can't interrupt their own powers. That's kind of like a combat game where your opponent always does something better, like have more flexibility than you as the player, which I don't know about you, but generally speaking, psychologically, that is a really terrible feeling. Where if you ever see a game that has a boss that does everything better than you because the system programmed them to do everything better than you, and you are restricted to just being gimped, that's usually not the greatest time. I mean, some can see it as a challenge and whatnot, but I would say the vast majority of people who play live service games would be pretty myth. Psychologically, it's uphill battle, right? So this has been present since the entire game. I actually accept that powers can be interrupted from an outside source, because you can also interrupt your own powers. Neverwinter was designed in a way that the enemy behaves and have the flexibilities much like the players. So when you like stun a monster in its activation frame, you stunned it because you timed the stun. Well, now you can't, sort of, as a player. You have even less flexibility, and the monsters are still just as flexible, where you have long activation times for all your abilities, and you can be interrupted at any time. I think the worse this hits is less so the cleric. It's moving forward for all melee players. Anyone who's a melee player will be at the mercy of power interruption if their abilities do not get scaled back in terms of recovery or active. I don't mind any of the recovery frames, like games with tight controls, if those effects happen right away. So I'm probably gonna hit on this a couple more times as I'm playing pretty much all three of them. I play the 3 fighter, paladin, and barbarian, the 3 that are going to be most affected by this moving forward. In fact, I'm kind of surprised they went and adjusted the dreadnought stuff first. I mean, the dreadnought is a little bit more flexible than the vanguard, but I imagine the vanguard, the Justicar, and the Sentinel are all grouped together in terms of what they're going to try to do about power interruptions, because they are a guarding class. And a guarding class requires the flexibility of guarding. Unless you're willing to, I don't know, make them competitive by giving them invulnerability as well, which that kind of adulterates basically what it's like to have a shield in the first place. So, right now the Dreadnought, they don't use shields. Like, not really. Actually, in fact, it didn't address the thing that I do, which is heavy slash into dig in. Dig in has higher priority than heavy slash, so you can heavy slash dig in and remove the slight recovery of heavy slash because of dig in. It is not a problem with shifting because guard doesn't have a higher priority than heavy slash, so you can't heavy slash guard into its recovery, right? Heavy slash is recovering, guards it's on top, and heavy slash, that doesn't work. So it's not a problem. But on Vanguard, some of it is a problem, or some of it might conflict. But you can still probably will see if heavy slash and dig in still works. But now, I'm not sure if it's intended, but making heavy slash have a lower recovery removes the need to power interrupt, which that design works really well. And clerics are range, so having the flexibility of power interruption deals with melee and range positioning as well. And I don't think this I would love to see how their methodology was when they decided 50% plus over baseline, 25% plus over baseline. That to me sounds like it was a controlled sample, and it dealt with highest potential, range of potential, and average. And it was measuring a metric that did not take into account mechanics and positioning. So it would affect less range classes than it would affect melee classes. And this design is troubling because I coincidentally happen to play all melee classes. I mean, I would love if they changed Sentinel into a melee, a range tank. That would be interesting, but you know, that'd be weird and different, and probably a violation of Wizard of the Coast's property D&D and whatnot. However, there aren't any ranged tanks, so when I think about this, power interruption is a loose thing that have benefits and negatives. But overall, when it comes to the guard classes, I'm worried, but at the same time, worried in an excited way of how they're going to address that. Sentinel slash isn't because AP is great. I wouldn't even say that. In fact, I would probably say most underutilize what Sentinel slash can do, which is block while attacking. So it is the only, with one exception, Justicar, you can get a feat for actually outside of Sentinel Slash is the only at will that can block and attack while moving, right? However, Justicar has a close second, but it's an encounter, which is Burning Light, which has a block modifier, so you can technically block with Burning Light, but it's an encounter, so it has little to zero uptime. In fact, it is so irrelevant most of the time. Those who use it have sacrificed so much efficiency and utility. So it's notes, and in my opinion, it's a responsibility of developers and those who they're using to playtest this stuff to be aware of the interactions between all the mechanics, not in isolation. I think design and optimization of games are not inclusive enough if they aren't talking about the player experience, if they're not considering the player experience but just raw numbers. That's kind of how I feel a lot of times that I have to remind myself when I'm bootstrapping through data, right? In science, when you test and optimize for things, you first collect the data, certainly, but you have to understand, you have to try your best for the methodology to reflect what your overall outcome you're looking for. And in this case, I think for these two, it worked out. Is this pattern gonna hold for the others? I hope not, because it's a really that little jest that turned out to be like a joke, right? Like I feel like it's a slight joke where like, we're looking at you, Sentinel Slash. That's not the same. It is not the same as a jesting, like, cleric scattering light conflagrate, great blessing of lights, heavy slash and reeve. That's not even close. And I hope they're not adjusting it like that. I mean, it's probably going to be for another half a year or something. But that's a kind of my little take. I wanted to do a little digression on the recent patch. I haven't talked about things from a mechanical standpoint in Neverwinter for a while, because these things don't change very often mechanically. Yeah. The quality, if they're working on quality of life fixes, the healers, for example, that's also, you know, that a thing I would want to say is single target and AoE healing being one encounter is incredibly myopic. So if there is anything that's actively being worked on in terms of quality of life to healers, split healing is counterintuitive. If you're talking about tighter controls, your effects have to be tighter as well. So segregating split healing was going towards loose controls. So if you're tightening up controls, encounter powers have to be single target and AoE exclusive. That's making it tighter. Unless you want to remove all the recovery rates, all the recovery frames, and all the active frames of an attack, so you can make it more casual friendly, like quality of life, make it more approachable, then certainly. Clerics have been on top a lot of times because they have the lowest recovery frames. Lowest active frames. As in, what I mean by that is they have reliable, quick, non-input related activity. Like, APM is higher on a cleric in general because of the balance, the average recovery frames, and the average activation effect time, like the activation time. You have a divine shelter, right? Let's just say AoE. Well, divine touch, bam, once like 500 millisecond recovery time, and divine shelter, it goes up to a second or more. And it's not the quote-unquote cast time I'm talking about. I'm talking about it's additional to cast time. Like, in fact, I feel like just making them active on one and the cast time being the whole animation, that's fair enough, I suppose. But divine shelter gets canceled all the time. Like, power interruption, it can't really just be seen as a positive thing. It is a learned thing. So if you're removing that, then I would highly suggest making a lot of things not interruptible from a hit on hit thing. So if you can't have the flexibility to prevent yourself from getting slapped in the face, because functionally power interruption also gives flexibility in movement and positioning, which clearly the over baseline thing doesn't account for, because this game is incredibly dynamic when it comes to positions. Reduce those windows, right? And then also reduce scanning time for healers. You have to scan for the player and then use it. Well, if you're applying strict times to everything and removing power interruptions, I hope that all the powers get reduced to a point where it adds to the actions per minute. Keeping actions per minute consistent would probably be the best compromise for tightening up on power interruption. As if this is an issue that they're trying to highlight. Anyways, that's a good solid 1 hour on mechanics. Now we're just gonna go into our usual like 9th week of bootstrapping, right? So as per usual, just to highlight some of the things about this game, I usually use a sentinel as a way to demonstrate, I guess, power interruption or the use of power interruption. And maybe I'll have other thoughts as we go through this. So what we did last week is we migrate forward this thing. So I like to expect that Verice is just going to tell us, hey, we're doing the same thing. Yeah, we're doing the same thing. So this is the one where you collect the abyssal magic, then you do the abyssal tears. So we do the same thing. Knowing that, then we turn these in. We do one set of these then. This will give us 20 off the bat. And then we get the 1, the security from last week. We don't need to do the heroics this week. So Verice is going to give us, I think it's just 1. All right. Guess we start at the bottom. So what do we have? Artifacts, tears. I didn't quite sort out all my thoughts when it came to power interruption, so some of it might have been meandering back and forth between points. It was one of the few things I don't think it was very tough to adjust, so I wouldn't have thought that that would be on the chopping block first, or like the editing block anyways. How am I in combat? What the actual thing is keeping me in combat? Are you serious right now? That is such a large combat range that had nothing, did not involve me. Other players, basically. As per usual. Oh, I need to collect the energy first, now that I think about it. Alright, so we're doing all of this and then coming back on the tiers. I don't think there's anything that I play that doesn't have power interruption in this game. My excitement about this is that I want to see what their alternative is. Like their alternative way of can you guys like not stand there? Why are there 3 of you? It is hard to even begin to tell you the difference between an effective tank player and not. The highest skill disparity, in my opinion, efficiency disparity, is any guard type shift. Next comes sprint disparity, so any slip, so that would specifically refer to Blade Master and Warlocks. And then comes the dodge roll ones. Any form of dodge rolling, which is the rest. It's the most standard type. It's not just powers. I would say I cut down, because of shift, I cut down my input time by half, at least, on average. You just can't see it because it's fast. Oops. It's all, I'm microing it all the time. You can see my, my character move in, just, jiggle in place after every recovery window that I can think of. Also, power interruption doesn't mean there aren't any recovery windows. It's just, it does shorten over time, and it collectively, speeds up your inputs. It's every single one, actually. I would say at least 60 to 70% of a tank's increased efficiency comes from power interruption. If you don't think that, then you don't play a tank long enough, in my opinion. Did I really miss artifact? Okay. I didn't change. It's incredibly divisive when you're conditionally making a negative change that doesn't compensate enough. Which didn't happen here. I'm not suggesting it happened here. I think the... Whoops, I've got the wards. The cleric timing, I would need to see it for myself if it's sufficient. But I imagine they took someone, looked at APM, right? Actions per minute, and they did like actions per minute through, I don't know, 30 minutes of gameplay or something, and see that the actions per minute was not changed. If actions per minute did not alter after decreasing the recovery time, then power interruption wouldn't feel as much of a loss. Because increasing, if you're compensating power interruption to responsiveness would also imply that how much time it takes to perform specific actions are still the same. Which in the end, I would say would still result in an edge given to those who power interrupt in the first place. So it preserves preserves that feeling of power interruption. If you lose actions per minute, then it's inherently detrimental, in my opinion. It slows the game down, which I don't have to tell you. Whoever was here for like the combat reworks, the most negative sentiment in the community, I would say, at least top 5 most negative sentiments is the decrease in the speed of the game, which then got normalized again because recharge speed and all that stuff kind of started coming back into play, and everything adjusted it again. But power interruption, the specific nature of power interruption, the attraction of it, I would argue, is not because of how effective it is on the like the nuance side. Initially, it could be its attractiveness for being effective, but in the end of the day, in my opinion, it's about actions per minute, how engaging it is. At least for myself. Maybe it's a minority opinion, but for my minority opinion, I suppose, it's about what they're trying to preserve, the responsiveness of the game, while providing a more consistent overall effectiveness between players, I guess, or being approaches. Like for me, this game is only sufficiently responsive with guard type characters. I mean, it doesn't stop me from playing other types of characters, right? Like we just did Neverwinter recruitment with the wizard, which I arguably have the lowest APM, one of the lowest APM of the classes. They're alright. I would say rogues are... I played a rogue and a wizard to splice on what I call the maximum efficiency type classes. Rogue and wizards are the efficiency type classes, which works really well with tight controls. So the tighter wizards and rogues are, the more reliable and consistent their high efficiency buttons are. I don't think most experienced players are going to disagree with me about their high efficiency, how high efficiency is for rogue and wizards are. Blade masters are the barbarian in general, including the paladin, even though they don't pain give, because most people will probably be referring to pain giving, and the fighter, all three rely on high APM play for being efficient. Actually, I take it back. Most people play dreadnoughts as a high efficiency class as opposed to a high APM class. The Vanguard is high APM. You need to be high to pull off being effective. And what I mean by effective, I mean above necessity. We're not talking about sufficiency here, which is what people use the word competitive for. Like, to be competitive, it has to be sufficient, above an average, so that people feel competent or being able to complete tasks competitively. I usually that just means sufficiency to me. Is it sufficient to be successful consistently so that people don't feel like it's underperforming, right? I don't usually go for efficiency plays. I don't think any of my play styles are efficiency plays. there's a chance they end up being the efficiency. So if you have both, that's where I think they're trying to address. The things that they are quote unquote balancing out are when both APM and efficiency line up. So you have high efficiency buttons, like encounters, high efficiency powers, right? Line up with high APM. So clerics was adjusted for that reason. The things that were high efficiency was also available to higher APM. What makes Sentinel Slash different is because it's not very efficient and you're sacrificing a lot of efficiency to get higher APM, in my opinion. So what is APM? It's just higher action power use. And Sentinel, the way Sentinel Slash works is you're guarding, you're moving. Those are actions. You're guarding, you're moving, you're generating AP. AP leads to an additional action every 15 or so seconds. So you're getting two actions at the same time. That's what makes Sentinel Slash efficient, in my opinion. I don't think a lot of people actually use Sentinel Slash to guard, but I do. It's actually one of the few really fun charging mechanics that allows for 3 actions at the same time. Slight movement, defending, and attacking at the same time with AP. So it has maximum action gain, or what I call action plus stuff. It's also a big reason why I play Sentinel as my main thing. It's easily Sentinel Slash is one of the highest APMs in the game. It's such a high utility that it's going to be difficult to replace. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do to replace it. It's gonna be a loss in action. I almost guarantee, I would say 80% that the Sentinel's losing in action. If they're removing Sentinel Slash, like what I mean is they're like reworking Sentinel Slash, then that's just the death of a playstyle. That's all. And I will just have to see what they suggest as a natural replacement for it. All right, now I do hunts. Oh wait, I already did one hunt. Just realized that. That's okay. I'm not really paying attention to what I'm doing right now. I have to do 4 hunts because of Verice's thing. I don't know if this leads to anything. And there was a patch, so it looks like Manicore's main bite still doesn't work. So there's still that. Still doesn't work. Bounding Slam, you know, change it to not threatening rush, but Radiant Charge. Yeah. I would say tighter controls, right? Tighter controls. Turn all the at-will distance closers to probably Radiant Slam, because Radiant Slam is the most reliable and consistent tight version of the charging at-will. Bounding Slam is the worst performing. It just has straight up negatives. It can be interrupted at any time. It has low activation, and it breaks. The animation breaks. And interruption means it interrupts itself, not gain anything. So if there's anything to balance out something for the better, like quality of life changes, all the charges. Any type of charge gap distance needs a lower recovery window, higher activation time, and then the removal of power interruption. Removal of power interruption actually helps the people who uses it, because if they power interrupt, it actually prevents the activation. So if you Radiant Slam and you power interrupt it too early, it doesn't trigger. But Radiant Slam has the lowest activation time and the lowest activation time, more or less. Threatening Rush is second, and Bounding Slam is like eternity. So tighter controls. If you're tightening up the controls by reducing the benefits, you gotta tighten up the controls by reducing the negatives as well, which includes Bounding Slam and the like, even Savage Advance. A one that is Blade Master specific is like Avenging Strike, the thing that goes up in the air and then slams on the ground. The activation time's too long. I mean, you can power interrupt it by accident, so that's an example of power interruption being negative. You gotta play fair, you know? Tighten up the controls. You gotta tighten up all the controls that make it negative as well. There are negative power interruptions as well as positive power interruptions. Fair is fair. You gotta equivocate in terms of design. Like, oh, you can't switch here. I think it's called Avenging Strike. And then the worst offender is Justicar's Radiant Charge. The daily Radiant Charge, that is comical, in my opinion. Saying it as respectful as I can, but the activation window on that and the negative power interruption is nearly comical, to the point where it's non-existent. Inherently, I would say the vast majority of players, if they play long enough, they would not end up using that. And the only reason I use Savage Advance is because of its benefits and its mechanics, like its function, not its activation time. Savage Advance's activation time is horrendous. It's nearly 2 seconds. And it can be interrupted at any point in that time. Like if I use Savage Advance right there, it would cancel out, lose its daily power. So Savage Advance, even though it's supposed to be a closer, like a gap closer, I just use it in like point blank range most of the time. On paper, it sounds great what they're doing, I suppose. On paper. But that's the downside of paper without proper methodology. Could really take a lot of inspiration, learning lessons from those who work in combat development. Heck, you know, fighting games would be a great, maybe even traditional beat 'em up games would be a great place to draw some inspiration on how to find alternatives in compensating for power interruption. I'm saying power interruption a lot because I want to normalize that jargon so then I can effectively communicate what I'm referring to, that the developers are referring to. Without saying too much, I witnessed firsthand that there are specific developers in Cryptic that prefer their own terminology over vernacular. So let's just stick with that. And I myself would like the similar respect as well. So I like to get used to specific terminology so I have the flexibility to communicate on the same way. Not only on the same wavelength, but at least intellectually on this. It is interrupting powers. However, interrupting powers often have like a connotation to it. But in this case, it's used in a positive sense, but an interruption is a negative sense. Animation canceling also has that, ironically also has that, canceling being a negative word often, but in this case, it's also positive. Weird how the human mind can normalize different connotations due to context. Kind of a nice thing. Flexible, but confusing at the same time. Yeah, I would say my enjoyment and interest in this game revolves around what I spent the first hour talking about today. Not about gear or stats, or so count me in the minority, I suppose. Like, performance is not grounded based on what you earn, what you meticulously, there's merit to that, you know, your meticulous builds and all that. But for me, it's about execution. Otherwise, in my opinion, this does not offer me any intellectual satisfaction that any other stats game, stat-oriented game would offer. So the we're quitting out of this one. Freaking T-Rex takes too long. High armor, high HP pool. Too long. Go fetch this one. I accidentally did one tear out of sequence, so now I'm kind of paying for it by finding one more tear here for Verice's thing. Pathing. I'm most impressed by the players who can really do what they do in the combat sense. It's fun watching and studying human input behavior in this game. Their gear, not so much. In fact, whatever that 50% above baseline, that's impressive. For me, I'm just glad I don't like serve as a benchmark for anything. Because honestly, after playing this long and on focus, if they were only focusing on things like baseline on APM or like AP, I probably would say if I represented the average, it would have been sooner rather than later that this stuff has been changed, or it would be changed. Like, I'm not playing a Blade Master, for example. Blade Master is less, me personally, is mechanically less engaging than a Sentinel. Okay, well, let's grab this. Oops. IBS is another one, right? IBS's window is incredibly activation time is very long. It can be power interrupted negatively incredibly. There are a lot of places where they can choose to increase efficiency as a compensation for the loss in APM. Obviously, the tightest controls would be what I suggested. Activation on 1 and hold the recovery time the entire time, but activation on 1. So the casting time would be a way for players to precisely know how long they have to recover. However, their powers are uninterrupted at all times. So you can, if you're going cold turkey, you can remove any form of power interruption by making all CDs mandatory and then treating all the monsters the same way too. So just casting time is, it's going towards like World of Warcraft. It's a cooldown dependent, casting time dependent game. But then we start wondering, so then is it a combat MMO anymore? Well, effectively, it becomes less, but combat MMOs still have 2 dimensions to it: positioning and visual timing, right? So premeditated visual timing. So premeditated damage and positioning is still a thing. So that's still a combat unique to combat MMOs. Especially positioning, which I don't think that has been factored in. I don't know how you would measure that, really. Like how you effectively measure your boss design philosophy, like boss design metrics and standards. If you're reducing, if you're trying to reduce power interruption and then decrease recovery time. If you're decreasing recovery time, it can help compensate for loss in movement speed due to lack of power interruption. I don't think that's what people use power interruptions for. I think the vast majority of people use it to, I don't know, pain give more or gain more actions. But actions also mean repositioning, which personally is, if I had to be very blunt about it, positioning and proper positioning doesn't get like that. That is not where power interruption comes in. Comes into play most of the time. That's important, I guess. To me, it's incredibly important. But I don't think I represent the vast majority of players. Usually power interruption is to gain efficiency, whether it's healing, durability, or damage. Usually damage. I prefer that I know that I can reposition at any time. That increases responsiveness. That is responsiveness to me. The ability to reposition. But I predominantly play a tank. So being able to shimmy on a dime at any time like this, and orb walking and stuff because of power interruption is essential to tanks. And other melee characters, but usually I think that's an underdeveloped skill. I don't think the developers typically focus on punishing that type of thing, poor positioning, too often. It's a little bit brutal, I would say. Positioning is incredibly brutal. Sorry, tough enough, I guess. It's really effective for clerics because they're range. I'm just saying. Right? Healers are ranged, so it's great. When you start addressing melees, then there's a different metric that's unaccounted for, in my opinion. And that's the flexibility in repositioning. Yeah. 7th, shutting out the abyss. Oh, it looks like the 7th. No, I think this is gonna be the same. Shutting out the abyss. It's they just changed the naming scheme, but I think it's the same. Collect energy and then closing up the tear. Might be. I mean, the 10th milestone might be different. I mean, not the 10th, the 7th on 10th week, like next week, maybe. I'll be doing that on the last week, which is next week. Because it's the end of the campaign. So we'll see if they saved like an extra special thing, maybe? Yep, and we're done for today. Oh, I forgot the one ward actually, this ward. We're done with our Sentinel. So here's a showcase. What, you know, I guess one of the things I'm really showcasing is the effectiveness of power interruption. If you play anyone that's a guard type, which is Sentinels, Justicar, Oathkeeper, Vanguard, or Dreadnought. A little less for Dreadnought because it's not shift, it's tab. You'll know what I mean. And it's incredibly hard to tell by looking without a point of reference. So like, in order to demonstrate the gap between someone who knows how to power interrupt with any of these three, you have to know what it's like not to do it. And it's incredibly hard not to do it. I actually think it's even more impressive to see someone not do it by accident than to do it by accident. Power interrupting with a shielded character. Because they're doing it unintentionally. A lot. Some actually do it newer players probably do it unintentionally and cutting their efficiency down too. For example, panic shifting, right? Panic shifting is a big deal. Especially, it's a little bit more big deal for the biggest class, which is the rolling, the dodge rolling, or the gap dodging. We'll just call them dodgers. Dodgers tend to get punished more because it has recovery time. It goes through the entire length. It has the entire width of ability, or like the entire positioning of the ability. And then you consume a big chunk of your stamina. However, in guarding, you stop stamina regeneration. So if you panic shift, not only will you unintentionally interrupt activation of abilities, you will also drain your stamina because you prevent it from recovering. So being effective at knowing when to power interrupt separates a big class of people, like a big gap. There's a gigantic gap between someone I see tanking for me, taking advantage of power interruption due to shielding, than someone who doesn't. In fact, if I were to queue into something, right? If I were to queue into a random group or LFG, I actually prefer the more consistent way, which is what Cryptic is probably trying to aim for. Minimizing power interruption so that you get a more consistent game. Basically, players who play classes that don't have power interruptions don't necessarily overperform, I mean, if they have power interruption, they can either incredibly overperform, but they also don't underperform. If I prefer the stricter class, which people who do not use power interruption, and they tend to just perform consistently because the moves can only do certain things. They can only be activated certain times. It's incredibly consistent because it's tight controls. So like someone who uses what? Like for Justicar, now that I'm on the Justicar, I can talk about the Justicar a little bit. Like me using Bane versus whenever I see someone initiate with what was it called? Enmity? It's this. Val just constantly just using Val off cooldown. Far more consistent. Is it higher than using Bane? No. Is it more reliable than using Bane? Absolutely. Yeah, see, like that was what I would call the perfect power interruption of Smite. So if I ever see someone like hammer down their Smite, then I know that they're not power interrupting. Like my Smite doesn't hit the ground. The Smite animation doesn't hit the ground. And when you smite over like a certain amount of time, you're saving a certain amount of time. Bane is the same. Bane actually has the probably arguably the fastest activation time. So you can just knock it out right away. Sometimes when you cast Bane, you don't even notice Bane was cast. I think a lot of people, when they use Smite, they don't even notice they cast Smite multiple times. Which I think as part of the quality of life change, I'm pretty sure paladins are already on the chopping block. So we'll see how we're gonna adjust to the new stuff. I'm pretty sure paladins are also on the chopping block again. Especially the tank. I don't think it's gonna affect me because I think the thing they're addressing is something I don't rely on. Yep. I'm not here to showcase like how to get great gear or anything, but I can certainly talk about mechanics when they come out. This will be a long good discussion when more changes come out. This is my bread and butter. I like talking about this kind of thing. Yeah, using Val on a boss Such a big loss. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is called Radiant Charge. Where's a Radiant Slam? Radiant Slam. Removing Bounding Slam and Threatening Rush. And just making them the Radiant Slam the replacement. Probably the way to go. Oh, I forgot again. I did the Abyssal Tears again without collecting the magic. It's weird. I think it's gonna be tough. This is gonna be an incredibly divisive thing they're doing, because then what happens that they have to do. Did I not pick up Virice's thing? Oh no, I forgot to pick up Virice's thing. That explains that. One of the tough things now is, so the moment they address the power interruption, they're gonna have to normalize, the Cryptic is gonna have to, oh no, I do have it. Oh, it is here. Just wasn't on a tracker. Yeah, see, it's not highlighted here. What the heck? They're gonna have to scale up all the inefficient things in order to appease. What is the heck? What is going on? Collect abyssal magic, right? That not the same thing as, they're gonna have to bump up all the efficiencies to make up for a loss in APM, which will effectively make all the classes play similarly outside of the flavor animations and whatnot. So this is the inherent downside, in my opinion, that will take some growing pains to adjust to. If I wager to guess. So those classes that have incredibly high efficiency buttons will either get nerfed, which I hope that's not the route they're going to balance, but all the low efficiency problems will require buffing. So to offset like something like Sentinel Slash, other encounter powers will have to be increased in efficiency to make up for Sentinel Slash. Maybe even a daily bump, and then make Savage it just completely maybe even completely speed up Savage Advance and all that other stuff to make up for the action loss. You have to work pretty. I say this a lot because the playstyle that I like playing in this game are not for individuals who don't want to do work for their performance. Power interruption is something you have to constantly maintain. Not something you can hit a few buttons and be incredibly efficient. if you really want that type of playstyle, wizards and rogues. I'll still continue playing this game. It's a word of observation. You know, some people just wanna press their buttons all the time. Press lots of buttons. Oh, so Varice actually has different variances of magic that you can collect. It's not the same one for the paladin. It's these things. Weird. Yeah. Huh. Or did I do this without noticing? That's a possibility. Okay. Okay, I see. Hmm. Really? Oh, this one kind of not not great, man. And it's the ward again. Forget the northeast ward so often. Still missing one. The heck, man. Guess we can touch these and see if there's a reasonable one in here. Yeah, sure. I hit my C button there. Okay. Go touch the top one. Okay. CP and go to the foot. The foot. Okay. Rock. Oh, you buttheads. How'd you guys get stuck in the environment? That guy. Flashbang. No flashbang. Good. Okay. Grab that ward and hit one of these abyssal tears. We have to hit both of them. Oops. Did the wrong turn. Okay. Oh, we did it. Okay. All right. That's it for the paladin. And now we can see the dreadnought. So I use both heavy slash and reeve, but I doubt it's gonna change my inputs though. Right, there we go. Alright. Grab our dreadnought. See if this is different. Oh no, it's the same. I must have done it without noticing. This is the one we're going to require to do the heroic encounters. As the fighter, we kind of did it in the reverse. We turn in the activity. Yeah, activities are only at 10%. So with that said, let's go north first. And do the north ones. Like pieces. So we just need the center piece. There's 6 here. Hmm. It doesn't affect me. Although the animation is... We'll see when we do the abyssal tears. Will probably be a little bit more noticeable. It is noticeable when I'm trying to heavy slash tremor though. So it slows down tremor. It slows down the tremor activation. So that's kind of punishing, I suppose. I don't know. Kind of hard to tell. It's pretty close. I was thinking it might affect tremor because they're trying to remove the sliding, right? The slide strafing. But they're removing that type of interaction. I didn't know if it's gonna bleed into affecting how power interrupts. It's very subtle. It's hard to tell. I like to think it's slower, actually. Heavy slash. See, heavy slash has a prepared slam. So prepared slam I generally use with heavy slash all the time. So it's heavy slash into any type of AoE in general. That's the typical. That's the only time I would notice a heavy slash delay. But it's hard to tell. It's really close. So it's insignificant. At least it's negligible to me. No, it still does the rubber banding thing. Nah. It's just overall, unless they didn't go into effect yet. It still does the slightly ice skating back to its original position. Unless it hasn't... I thought the patch notes was... I think the patch notes was... Oh, you know what? It could be for this Thursday. No. I thought it was last Thursday. And we grab this. It still does a little like jittery thing. So it's not that they're talking about. So at least whatever it is, it's just overall negative for me. It's fine though, it's negligible. I thought it was either gonna be feel less responsive, contrary to what they say. It was gonna feel less responsive. It feels about the same. And it still does the jittery motion thing. Like this thing. Oh, yeah. Oh no, it doesn't. Not for heavy slash. Actually, it doesn't do it when it's focused on one target, so that's not too bad actually. It stopped doing the thing that I don't particularly like. But now what about... Oh no. That might be bad. I don't know if they wanted that. What I just did, ooh. We'll see. We'll see if it's, if that was just a placebo. Hold up. It might actually be faster now. Not a lot of people do this, so it's fine. If you dig in for Dreadnought and Vanguard, dig in is also a power interrupt too. Actually, dig in is far more have higher priority than have a higher priority than shift. So I don't know. I don't know if they went out to achieve what they wanted to with that one. Yeah, I am not sure they got what they achieved. I mean, they stopped the strafing thing though, so that's nice. It is a slight gain. That's why this is tricky. I think they're I don't blame them for taking their time, because it's a tricky thing where you decrease and increase and decrease certain things. Mechanically, they're all interconnected, and that's what I mean by the dangers of designing something based on a metric that doesn't measure everything, like, holistically. Where you gain one, you're gonna... unexpected bonuses too. I think the dig in power interrupt is even more efficient now. If you're into that, it's not for everyone, because tabbing requires your ring finger, and then shifting, if you're doing it like me, ring finger and pinky has to be very coordinated to be able to swap between digging in, the tab, and the shift. But if you can tab power interrupt, heavy slash, that's really fast. Arguably arguably even faster than ever. So like one of the ways, provided you have enough stamina, obviously, you have to be pretty fast. Yeah, because you can reave. The tab is what interrupts. Tab has higher priority on heavy slash and reave. And shift doesn't, because shift does the alternative thing, that mechanic that is really not my jam. The guard mechanic, where it's carried over from Vanguard, where the reason why you can't shift cancel, right? Like if you heavy slash shift, right? If you do this, you go into the guarded, go into the guarded thing, and you get punished for this if you do it too early. But for heavy slash this, you do both. So if you tab cancel, tab interrupt your at wills, you're still guarding, but you have no latency, and you have no like this. So if you're like stationarily trying to defend in place, I don't know how you would move with your ring finger. You can't move left. It will be a lot. It's a lot easier to pull off if you're on a gamepad. Actually, in this case, this is more of a fight stick kind of situation where the orientation of the keyboard is not great for this. Because your ring finger is used for tab, and you need your ring finger for A, so you can't move left. But if you're moving right, you can reave while digging in like this. So you can hold down reave on a target, and all you have to do is tab. You tab interrupt the reave, and you can still gain the defense bonus from tabbing. It does consume stamina though. But if you do it fast enough, it's not very noticeable. Yeah, like this. It's a minor tech. I wouldn't suggest using it too often. It is faster though. You do from the slight change, it's very noticeably faster. Minor, but still faster. All right. What do we have down here? Mages. Artifacts. That guy's doing mages too. And mages aren't unique. Or it could be doing injured mages, not captured ones. Pick up the capture ones first. Injured ones. You're still grounded though. So you don't get like the shift bonus. The bonus of shift is you're still moving when you power interrupt. Dig in, the tab trades off for loss in mobility. So I think that's still fine. It's a big trade-off not to be able to move. I don't use it too often because it grounds you. I should just usually use shift. Yeah, see, I couldn't even... dig in doesn't have priority over encounters, though. So no encounter gain from recovery. Alright. That's okay. It's about the same. It still does the weird rubber banding thing. That's a little disappointing. I thought it might remove the rubber banding thing. It jitters every once in a while, still. Less so. Less so. Overall, a positive. We can test it on a dummy. We'll test it on a dummy in a bit. I think the guarded things being on a dreadnought is a little weird. Like the guarded attack. Personal request is to make it optional. As in like allow me to turn it off or not. Like unallocate guarded striking on a dreadnought. Vanguard is okay. I still actually would prefer that as an option on the Vanguard too. Like the second layer of at wills. I would love to remove guarded things when I don't want it. Gives me more utility. And it streamlines the... Yeah, see, I'm unintentionally engaging that. There is one of the few moments that if I tabbed, I would be able to power interrupt out of the red in time with tab. But since I shifted, I can't. The shift takes longer. Has a higher recovery time. Oh, mages. Okay. Yeah, that would be probably my personal request. It allow you to toggle on and off the use of guarded at wills. Just a personal request. Not a deal breaker or anything. It just removes the accidental activation of it. There is a time and place for it, but it's very specialized. So most of the time it doesn't come into play. However, it can come into play sometimes. Can't see the ground effect. Yeah, see, I can't see the ground effect. Yep. What happens when you don't clear out your grounds and level your indicators? Didn't know what was constantly freezing me. I couldn't see it. Wow, that anvil miss. Brave still kinda sucks with that tech. Don't do that tech with Reeve. I'm almost tempted to just do the Abyssal Tear so I can synchronize these guys. I don't know how much activity. Oh, we gotta do heroic encounters on this guy. So let's look at HE call. Okay. Oh, that's it. Yeah, it just goes to show you there are a lot of two-week purchases. Uh-oh. Actually, hold on, we're in one. They said one fiend. I see. I doubt we'll get there in time. Well, let's just follow the train call. Nope. That was a debate. That fiend call was a debate. Unless... Nope. Just kidding. I guess they're here. Sure. Yeah, no thanks. Man, that guy got slapped. Ow. Let's see. Nope. I was seeing how quickly I could do it. Not quickly enough. Hmm. 180? Hmm. Let's see. What is Reeve at? 60? Hmm. I don't think so. Please don't hit me. Please don't hit me. Stop hitting me, please. Rip. Let's see. Oh, there goes all my... Oh. Run away! Not like this! Rip. Nah, the activation point is still the same. Yeah, the activation point is still the same. It's just you can move faster afterwards. So they reduced the recovery, but they didn't move up the activation point. That's fine. Fine. It wasn't clear if they moved it up or not. They just said you can exit out of it quicker. That means that it didn't, unlike the clerics, the damage is dealt sooner. So nothing changed. It's irrelevant. It's okay. Didn't like the jittery thing anyways. The guy just pressing space in place. Yep. Go ahead. Go ahead, guys. There, you can have some peeps to play with. Yeah. I actually kind of like it. You don't shift around too much. Let me see. Yeah, so you can't move left or right when you're holding it down anymore, which is good. I like that. It jittered around a little bit when I was experiencing ping, but it's fine. I actually quite like it that you're grounded now. Still, my main issue with the slight fluctuation, like the 20 millisecond, 30 millisecond fluctuation, is having a toggle for this. This stuff. Block. Wait, can I inactivate this? No, I can't. Yeah. I want to inactivate Shield Bash and Guarded Strike. That would be nice. Personal request. Oh, I still need to complete one more. Maybe these guys are going down here? No, that doesn't look like it. Proto 5. Hasn't started yet. Yep. I think that would be my my secret request. My personal one. Be able to toggle off Guarded Strike and Shield Bash as I please. Sometimes I kind of want to use it, sometimes I don't, but 80 to 90% of the time I don't want to use Guarded Strike or Shield Bash on either Vanguard, on both Vanguard and Dreadnought. If their animations were, if their activation and animations were shorter, so their activation and recovery were shorter, then perhaps, but it's really unresponsive. Like whenever you accidentally, say you're attacking, you accidentally hit shift too quickly, you get stuck into an unintentional proc of Guarded Strike and Shield Bash. It not only grounds you, it double punishes you because it locks you into place. So if you're a Dreadnought and you're trying to get out, right? You're trying to get out, you either guard and get stuck in place too soon, which is unintentional, or you guard and you were staying stuck in place, which is still not that great because you're a Dreadnought. And then sometimes tanks get stun locked by unintentionally get stuck in shield slam or guarded strike. So for me, most of the time, it's because it's grounded. The animation is just too long. I mean, if you're a meat shield, I can see that's the time that I would say it's reasonable. But then the idea is you would be digging in instead, as opposed to accidentally hitting shield slam and guarded strike. Because dig in reproduces with mitigation, what you're trying to do anyways. So perhaps that will be changed sometime in the future. I'm curious if I can meet someone who can tell me, demonstrate to me the practical use of guarded strike and shield slam at the cost of mobility. I can think of very specific cases that they may be useful. Okay. All right. 75% activity. It's not good enough. Okay. Well, so the patch did what it was supposed to do. Not bad. Guess that's fine. Nothing really changes on my end. Alright. 9 p.m. local time. We'll give it like 10 minutes. Our customary end of stream thing. Or end of this section thing. See if any peepos, any brave peepos. So it's 9 up here, right? Let's see. I doubt it, but it's really late. Healer. Yep. I think we're just gonna wrap it up. Wrap up week 9. Yeah, man. That's yeah, I had to wait till the wee hours. Oh wait. Okay. Well, I guess we'll just hop in. It's just an RTQ. But they were just looking for a tank. Might as well do it. No reason not to. Hooray! Instant queues. Alright. So that resets our 10 minute thing. I'll keep doing these until and we'll go like 10:05, 10:05:1. So this was within 10 minutes. So when we exit out of this, we'll give 5 minutes on the timer. If someone else requests something for a tank or a healer, we'll pick that up and then we'll go down to a minimum 1. If it just so happens that someone is requesting something within a minute, we'll keep going until that stops. That'll be our little routine for the future. Seems very reasonable. Rags to riches, huh? Valindra's death gods? I don't want to be Valindra's anything. Grim Crimson. House of the Hulk. Feel Good. Incorporated. Or Antenna? Not going to try. Okay. Gwen with 2 N's. Keely. Of course, Leroy Jenkins. We've seen this guy around. Blade Master. I think I made a comment on a previous one. It's like, of course there's a Blade Master named Leroy Jenkins. Let's see how many goobers we have. Goobers ahoy! Let's see if that visual bug happens. Oh, no visual bug. There is one on here that gets oh, that guy instantly scrolled like nobody's business for messing up. Don't you think? I saw that, buddy. Really? Ooh, there's a goober. Instantly res scrolled. Now that's a goober. Oh, that was weird. Thank you. Shifting. Rubber banding. Oof. There are at least 2 goobers in this group. Two pain-giving goobers. Oh yeah, definitely 2 pain-giving goobers. Okay. Looking dirty. All right. So what? It's 9:12. Put 5 minutes. 5 minutes on the clock. 9:17 local time. Anyone know why the Vorpal illusion seems bug like blinking? That's a codec, the rendering thing. Unfortunate. That's a legacy visual thing. Goes with what was it? That mount? Something changed during that mount as well, like this one. Really liked this mount when it was released, but then there was a rendering update that caused it to flash like a crazy flash. Also goes with the trails. Anything with a trail has some crazy artifacts. What was it called? The Celestial Lion? I might have skipped it. I really liked the Smoky Trail, but then it got borked. Where the heck is it? Oh, here it is. Oh, the Neverwinter Lion. It looked nice. Then it got borked. Really liked it. Got 3 minutes. Not yet. Few minutes. Nope. And one thing that I wouldn't have mind trying to get, but not really, because it involves doing it over and over again. That just isn't my jam. I wouldn't mind getting this armor. Enemies that are facing you do 6% more damage to enemies that are facing you. But it involves doing Master's Temple of the Spider, which I think one time is enough for me. I didn't do it just once, but one time to see the end. For this one, which one am I most interested in seeing how it works? No. Probably this. daily power, 300 mag around you. But then you give up banged vice, which I don't even think it's working properly. Or this. I don't mind this either. This one might be okay. It's quite good, actually. That also involves, you know, master stuff. Hiding modifiers behind a master's completion is pretty meh. Well, it looks like that's a wrap. Yep. Just a bunch of other people who are looking for 2 roles. I can't fill 2 roles at the same time. Just constant asking the same 2 roles. You probably could guess which 2 roles is tank and healer. I was just waiting until they go down to 1. Whoever goes down to 1. Alright. Well, that's a wrap for week 9. Maybe I'll make some attempt off stream to get a copy of those just for shenanigans purposes. Alright. Week 9. I think we're gonna downgrade it to a 4 out of 10 now. Seems like the last 4 weeks is more below average. It's really below average. Started off strong, started lower. Yeah, it's more of a 4 out of 10 experience. We talked about the patch notes. Maybe next week there might be some interesting patch notes for this coming Thursday as well. I'll make a comment about it. And then it will be off for another 2 months or something until the next module. Nothing really big to talk about other than the mechanics, so we talked about it earlier today. Alright, that's a wrap for today. Guess I'll see you guys next Monday for the last and final week of Demonweb Pits.